Hello folks and welcome to today's episode of Our Game. Myself, Shane Stapleton, joined as ever by Michael Verney. Michael, how are things?
All good, Shane, all good.
Yeah, brought to you by OurStore.ie, the official home of merchandise here on Our Game. We've also got a couple of coaching clinics coming up this weekend. Friday evening in Derryloughlin in County Tyrone, Keane Mackey, Conor Gormley and Conor Gilligan will be hosting workshops there. That's going to be a brilliant event. You can get the tickets in the video underneath the video. There's a link.
Early, Shane, it's early.
Yeah, it's fierce early. We've also got one in hurling on Saturday morning, Kilworth, County Cork, which isn't too far from the borders of Tipp, Waterford and Limerick. Colin Spillane, Eddie Brennan and Owen Brislan there. How's tricks with you this morning?
Very good, Shane. Yeah, very good. Yeah, all hurling this weekend, so it's kind of narrow kind of focus. And you know something, to be talked about, and we've even talked about maybe the lack of importance maybe in the league and how there's no jeopardy in it. But like looking at Limerick and Clare on Saturday night, are you telling me that they're not going to go hammer and tongs? 100% they will. Galway and Cork probably the same. Tipp and Kilkenny the same too. So like there's certain games that regardless of what time of the year they're played, they'll always have a massive significance, and definitely just happens to be a couple of them at least this weekend.
Yeah, there's a bit of a derby demolition to this. Yeah, Limerick, Clare, obviously traditionally huge rivals. Galway, Cork, obviously they're not neighbours in any way, shape or form, but a lot of their history, there's some big games between them. Kilkenny, Tipp shared so many huge games. Even like Dan Shanahan bringing Waterford to play the Laois team that he's now involved in as well. So there's plenty of that stuff going on. One of the most important pieces of news came out just in the past day or two with Derek Lyng being interviewed, and it's to do with TJ Reid. So there's a chance he'll miss the entire league, but Lyng said anyway, we'll see how it goes. At the minute, no, not for the next 2 or 3 games. I'd like to have him certainly right come the summer. He's had a long campaign with Kilkenny and Ballyhale, but has to be continuous but that has been continuous for the last number of years. So it's important that we do manage it. He has a few niggles, nothing major. We'll be looking at bringing him back at some point. He's working away with our S&C team at the minute, and he's eager himself. He's very ambitious and determined to come back in as good a shape as possible. How he has transformed himself from the player he was when I was finishing up has been extraordinary. He's brought his game to another level. And to be honest, he's always looking to improve, and that's the way. He has the right attitude. He's ambitious, and you have to see that through Ballyhale and with Kilkenny. So I'm looking forward to having a fit TJ Reid at some point. In some ways, I think it's no harm. He already knows what TJ Reid gives him, and he'll know again in the summer, and it's probably just for the best to let a player like that rest up. Like, it's not like he needs 6 months to get sharp, 6 months worth of games. He'll come back and after a game or two and he'll be flying. And in the meantime, he just gets to know more about other players. Who's going to step up for me in the meantime?
Yeah, 100%. And so I don't think he played any league last year either, did he? Did he have was it a quad injury he had last year, I think? He didn't play any league. He was obviously pretty rusty. I think he came on against Westmeath maybe in the championship, to the best of my recollection. But it's all about just having him right for that couple of months during the summer. Like I'd imagine things will just go completely down now for him. He'll be doing lots of bits of kind of pre-season work, I'd almost say, with Mickey Comerford and the lads there. But it's almost like tapering things back, getting them back, then getting them probably back in the pitch. What are we looking at? Mid-March, something like that. Get 4 weeks maybe in on the field, and then he'll be ready to go for championship. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised. I don't think he'd play any league at all. I think it makes sense not to play any as well. And not being smart, Leinster is less cutthroat than Munster in that regard. You can't. I wouldn't say you could kind of sleepwalk into Munster, whereas with due respect to Westmeath and Antrim, Kilkenny should be winning those games, even without potentially TJ Reid or without TJ Reid at 100%. So they can kind of ease them in a bit more. They're afforded that luxury, I'd say.
So what you're saying is 4 teams should come out of Munster and 2 should come out of Leinster.
Jesus, who are the 2 teams that ran outside of Clare? Galway ran Limerick. It's funny. I don't necessarily disagree with you on like how potentially lopsided it is, but there's something about when Galway and Kilkenny get a crack at Limerick or get a crack at those Munster sides, they seem to be able to. Not that the form is ripped up in Leinster. Leinster is not as competitive as Munster. There's no point in saying any different. But whatever it is, when they play these big games, All-Ireland finals, semi-finals, the Leinster opposition are always able to raise it. Probably now, to be fair, probably the top 2 in Leinster, maybe outside of looking back at maybe Wexford in 2019 when they probably should have beaten, or they should have kicked on, I'd say, against Tipp. But I agree with you in the sense of competitiveness, but the Leinster teams are always able to raise their game, I don't know, when they come up against the big Munster teams.
Unless they're playing Tipp in All Ireland and they get hammered out the gate.
That's Kilkenny you're speaking of.
Yeah, getting hammered by Tipp in All Irelands. That's the new thing.
Tipp haven't been in All Ireland in a while now. But maybe,
and how much did they win it by? How much did they win it by when they were there? 14 is the answer.
14, and was it 9 before that?
Yeah.
Was it 329 to 29 points or something? Kilkenny ended up something like that.
It's very
when you win by that much, you just forget.
Yeah. Sully 180 talks about even if 4 teams get out of Munster and Tipp still won't get out. He says, would it be fun to have a playoff Leinster 1 versus Munster 1 all the way down? Say Munster would win 3 or 4 of those games. Galway for Leinster this year, lads. Well, maybe so, and that's coming from a Wexford man by look at the image there. You were talking to Niall Moore, former Limerick player and coach. We had him on a coaching clinic not so long ago, and he was excellent. And he was talking about how John Kiely has been handling things lately.
Yeah, I just kind of said it to put it to Niall. Like, I find it amazing, really. Like, not that there's been a heap of controversy in Limerick, but they've had their fair share of bits and pieces. And I just put it to Niall, how well John has managed kind of through turbulence and that. And I just thought he had some interesting things to say. He just said, it's long enough here, but I think it's interesting. He said he's a guy who's invested in the fabric of Limerick hurling and what it means. It's not just about his reign. He wants to set the foundation in place for generations that come after, and intertwined with that, as much and all as he do anything for his players, if there's a line or a stance that needs to be taken, then the mood toward the principle comes out in him. It's very much a firm hand. He'll always have the best interest of the players at heart. It's only maybe when they're retired that they'll realise decisions that he took. And he just goes in and talking about how his generation continuously shot themselves in the foot, like with different things that happened on and off the pitch, and they did, and he was quite honest about that. But he just said John lived through that era as a player in the 90s. As a supporter, he would have seen it in the 90s, so he knew what was needed to quench it. The beauty of it, you'd hope, is that he's creating a generation of future managers and coaches. And he just went on to say, the real seeds of John's reign will only be seen in the decades that follow, even more so than now. And it's funny, like, you had Mike Casey on a coaching clinic, and he was, he was bamboozling people. He was that, forward thinking about what he was doing, and his methods look really interesting. And I know you have Barry Hennessy signed up, and maybe another Limerick player signed up as well. The coaching and management, the level that they're been exposed to, you'd imagine will leave Limerick in a really, really good place going forward, because like that's the beauty of a really good setup, is that it's not just about the here and now. It's about all the coaches, all the managers that are going to come on the back of Paul Kinnerk, on the back of Alan Cunningham, on the back of Donal O'Grady, on the back of John Kiely, on the back of Caroline Curd as well. So it does look like they're kind of future-proofing themselves as well, I'd say. But just on Kiely and dealing with controversy, like from a media point of view, maybe it's not the easiest thing from our end, because you're in a bit of an information vacuum. But he has been able to kill things dead in the water pretty quickly, and things that would derail maybe other setups and have derailed other setups.
But like you've heard it from Limerick supporters as well as I have, that there seems to be one rule for certain players and another rule for others, that some are cut loose after an indiscretion, whereas others are sort of given an extra chance because maybe they're that bit more of a crucial player. But I suppose we've seen that over the decades in different teams in different sports, that there is one rule for one and one for another. By the way, you mentioned Mike Casey and how good he was at the coaching clinic, but he also he himself and his brother, they're involved with the under-15 teams, and they're bringing some of what works at the top level with Limerick to those young lads. So you can imagine how good Napierchik is going to be in another 4 or 5 years, when they're coaching these players to be thinkers on the field and looking up and how to use the ball and so on and so forth, as he did on that day. So that would be worrying for some of the opposition around some of the other clubs. Cassius King says, right good Fitzgibbon game last night between DCU and the old WIT. Set you Waterford, I suppose.
I love the way he referred to it as the old WIT. That's the way I'd be referring to it too.
Yeah, ask Limerick the most likely team to beat them and who they've gotten their toughest games by far against in actual knockout games. It's Galway and Kilkenny. 2 All-Munster All-Irelands were massacres. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that is fair enough.
It doesn't play up to your narrative, Shane, but it's fair.
Yeah, I like, to be fair to Clare and Munster last year, they put up serious games against Limerick. I don't know, how much do you count that first game out down in Ennis when Limerick weren't at full strength? They didn't have everyone out, but the one in the Munster final in Thurles, like that was, full board there from both teams.
It was, and I don't know, it seems to be a byproduct of with a lot of teams when they really throw it down to Limerick, that it seems to the physical toll. Like that would be one thing with Clare. I'd imagine they've gone hard after their S&C this year in the sense of, and I know Shane O'Brien's dad is involved, isn't he, this year? Shane O'Brien that plays with Limerick. But that's an interesting one, right? It's one thing, you know, being able to lay it down to Limerick on a given day, and they did it 3 days, you'd say. But it's coming back to what's next. They were flat against Wexford. They were flat as a pancake against Kilkenny. It's been able to back it up, and Limerick seem to have raised the bar in that regard of, yeah, they'll go through a physical bruise and battering game, but they'll still come out and do the exact same thing the next day and the next day and the next day.
I'm wondering, you know, this year we're seeing an awful lot of teams bring the ball out and run it through the lines, playing triangles, all that kind of stuff that that Limerick have been doing for 4 or 5 years and has given them a fair old head start on everybody else. So last weekend we saw an awful lot of it between Wexford and Galway. I'm not criticising either team. I think if you want to compete these days, you're going to have to do it. Cork have done a fair measure of it the last couple of years. Tipperary have been transformed in terms of how they're playing, using this running through the lines the last couple of games. So I'm just wondering, how many games are we going to get this year that are dour sort of games, teams trying to run it through the lines, running into traffic, turnovers. But then the other side is once they get very good at it and once the physicality goes through the roof during the middle of the summer, like every Limerick game last year was brilliant because teams brought it to Limerick and they were able to respond, even though that's the type of game they also play. So maybe with a little short-term pain, we could end up with an awful lot of excellent games when every team is physically very strong, playing that type of game, but it's been done at 100 miles an hour where there's lots of turnovers and physical battles.
Yeah, and at the moment, sure, like Limerick are far from home at the moment. I was looking back at their game yesterday, and like I've never seen as many stick passes go astray, and trying to do maybe flicks and things that maybe would work in summer but just won't work at this time of the year. And I think it's the same point from all the other teams that are trying to, you know, replicate some of what they're doing. Like that doesn't happen overnight. Like you don't just all of a sudden wake up one day and be able to work these triangles and be able to, you know, not put a ball down around a lad's feet and make sure that the hand pass is always here and it's always to a man moving into it. But like, you know, some people have given out about Limerick even a couple of years ago that, you know, they weren't that good to watch. I go back and say that all of the best games in last year's championship, as you say, were involved in Limerick. The All-Ireland final, the semi-final, the Munster final, the Munster round-robin game with Clare, the Munster round-robin game with Waterford, their last league game against Clare. Like they're, to me, nearly all of those games were involved in Limerick, the best games of last year. And the same with Kilkenny back in the day. Like the Tipp Kilkenny games were brilliant games. There was nobody else able to really throw it down to them when they were going well. Before that, the Cork Kilkenny games were brilliant as well. So the standard bearers tend to bring everybody with them, and you know, definitely you'd say the gap wasn't as big last. Definitely wasn't even anywhere near been as big as it was the year before. And now it's going to be interesting to see can Limerick kick on and open that gap up again like it was in 20 or 2021.
Yeah, let us know, folks out there. Do you think that the gap will go back up this year? Cian Lynch and Peter Casey are back. A couple of more young lads like Cathal O'Neill, maybe Adam English and so on. Will that gap swell again this year, or the way teams are now playing and they've had an extra year or two, some of them, will the gap narrow even further? The Camogie Association, they've announced that the Division 5 third level competition will be renamed after Aisling Murphy. So the Aisling Murphy Cup, she played for Kilcormac, Cloughy and Mary I. So that's a very nice touch there. The cup was donated by Mary I. Damien Comer, luckily from his point of view and also for Galway and Pádraig Joyce, he's avoided a season-ending cruciate injury. So there's hope that he'll be back later in the campaign. He looked in an awful lot of discomfort towards the end of that game against Roscommon last week, which the Rossies won 9-8. So that's a huge relief from Pádraig Joyce's point of view, because it's very hard to see Galway pushing to get to an All-Ireland final again without the main man.
No, just because, can you think of another forward in the country that offers what he offers? I mean, like offers that. He's just so unpredictable, really, and he's so hard to handle. Like, how do you go about trying to stop him? The thing about trying to stop him is, it's one thing stopping him, but are you going to stop him to the benefit of Shane Walsh or to Rob Finnerty? That's the thing about it. It's like what you were saying about, was it 2018? Like Ian Burke was able to benefit from Comer being double teamed or extra attention going on Comer. So I just think they need him, and I think they'll wrap him up now and try and get him back and get him ready for the summer. Realistically, there's a lot more games in the football championship this year as well. They should have themselves in a position where it's got maybe a little bit less cutthroat, where they'll be able to get some game time into them in games that they probably should be winning anyway, if you get me.
Do you reckon that the Shane Walsh situation will be similar to the TJ Reid? Long club campaign, long inter-county campaign. We probably won't see him until the tail end of the league, maybe the last game or two, a bit like Clifford.
Yeah, I had heard anecdotally that Pádraic Joyce didn't know too much about him going away after the Crokes All-Ireland. So I'm not sure. Apparently he's supposed to be away for 3 weeks. So there's probably only, about 10 days of that gone, I'd say, at this stage. But I'd say Galway people and anybody that wants Galway to win an All-Ireland, the whole Crokes thing and how it, like, realistically, he did 3 month longer club campaign than he normally would have, realistically. And he was playing high-level games where he's been double-teamed and getting a lot of attention. So I would say the same as TJ. He's not, he's 3 or 4 years younger than TJ, but he's still going to need, there's going to be an awful lot of timing and expert timing needed there, I'd say. And he's probably was carrying knocks into that club campaign as well. So I'd say he'll be coming back, getting into like a prehab program maybe for the guts of about 4 weeks. And yeah, will he play much league action this year? Don't really see him playing too much. Saying that, I didn't see the Clippers playing too much either, and Paddy came on in the second round, so you just don't know.
Yeah, and then like you just wonder with some of these lads coming back so soon after club campaigns. And I'm thinking about Derry. Later on in the summer, will we start to see them pick up niggles, or is it more next year then, because they've had extended campaigns for a couple of years? Eventually there's a price to be paid with these things.
Yeah,
more people.
Rory Gallagher said that there was, now I don't know what it is, but he said with the Glen lads that there was a plan for them. So I don't know if that was come back, play the first 2 games, and then you have 2 weeks off, and they're not going to do anything for those 2 weeks. I'm not so sure, but I'd agree with you. I think you can be a bit blindsided by short-term goals and saying, the Glen lads are back and they're flying, but will they be flying in June and July when Derry want to try and get up the Hogan Stand steps? The edge, I think, can be taken off you. So you need to, I think, and that's why managers' own experiences, even in their own playing career, and knowing, okay, if I give this lad another 2 weeks off here, he'll probably be bouncing more come summer. Whereas, he wants to come back. Just because the player wants to, everybody wants to play, generally. Do you know what I mean? But you have to kind of think of the long-term goal of it. So there's a lot of, I'd say there's a lot of planning goes into that. A lot of thought goes into that. Not just, and I think a lot of it is on a human level as well, of if I'm doing the same thing over and over every day for 8 or 9 months in a row, am I going to be browned off with it? Probably. Am I going to be browned off with when I need it most? Potentially as well. So putting in a little break, holiday, whatever it is, to keep things fresh, I think is a massive, massive thing.
Did you see some of those quotes from Raphael Varane recently? So he's a soccer player for Man United and France. He retired from international football, and he said the very highest level is like a washing machine. You play all the time and you never stop. We have overloaded schedules and playing non-stop. Right now I feel like I'm suffocating, and that the player is gobbling up the man. I wonder, would it ever feel quite like that with a GAA player, or the fact that you do have because it's not professional, you do have a life, your work, and you have other stuff going on. That does sound quite extreme for Varane, from Varane, and it's good that someone's actually saying it, and especially in those very strong terms. But I wonder, are there GAA players who, in their own version of it, do feel like it's a washing machine going around and around?
Oh, I'd say so, yeah. Now, I have a lot less sympathy for professional sports people who are lining their pockets, and he's getting paid unbelievably well. And his family, and probably the family that comes after that, is going to be looked after on the back of his career. So I have a little less sympathy in that regard. I'd say a lot of them step out, Shane, at this stage, inter-county players, if they feel it's like that, because you just can't do it, because it is literally relentless. It's over and over and over again. Back to Limerick, I think they have gotten a really good balance of when they're off, and when they're on, they're on. And I think that's hugely important. I don't know what you were like when you were hurling, particularly, at your peak or whatever, but I definitely overthought about things and kind of was nearly burning myself out mentally. Whereas I think, the best players generally, they have that drive and they have all that motivation to succeed, but they're able to pull back a small bit and switch off from it all. And when they're off, they're off. When they're, evening time, they're not thinking about games or not thinking about their sport. Whereas when you overanalyze things too much, I think you can get mentally burnt out as well as physically burnt out.
And I'd say that extends to management teams as well.
Oh, yeah.
So we're asking players or people out there, do they think that the gap is going to widen or narrow this year? TV Street says, big year for Limerick, in my opinion. Half the team are getting that bit closer to their physical peak. Sean O'Sullivan says, short game will break down this time of year, but you may as well practice it anyway. That you're better drilled come championship. Train hard, fight easy, as they say. And TV Street, it's an awful pity these smart slitters didn't include some match stats like the speed of the ball, maximum power, etc. Plenty of lads would love to nerd out on those. They definitely would. Richard Hogan, did I miss Shane Shane saying that Tipp are back after Sunday? And TV Street says, no, Richard, that's a separate segment. This goes back to the smart slitters again. Richard Hogan, surely an opportunity to have something like goal line technology where it crosses the goal line crossbar that the ref gets a notification somehow. So
imagine beep beep, the phone just starts beeping it. Yeah, it was across the line. I was just
they have that in soccer.
Yeah, I was just watching back Cork and Limerick and Brendan Cummins, who was on the slitter committee for the best way of putting it, and I just thought it was funny or peculiar that it's just like to do with where the balls are coming from, shall we say, and where they've been made, and that they're standardized. Surely, like if we were making a big departure and putting something inside or whatever inside the ball, that we would be able to get a bit more information out of it. Do you know what I mean? That was my own opinion on it. Speed would be great. Like, wouldn't you love to have those kind of stats? Joe Canning's free in the 20th minute when he went for a goal was, he reached 145 kilometers per hour or whatever it is. Yeah. I think stuff like that would be interesting. We definitely are missing a trick in the GA. I've said it to you before about the lack of records and stats within the GA. But like, imagine it flashes up on screen after Aaron Gallant scores a goal in the All-Ireland final, 75 miles per hour or whatever it is. Or, do you know what I mean? Like, I just think stuff like that, I think it's a bit of a no-brainer. It's interesting. We need to probably Americanize it a bit more in that way, as in big up what the lads on the pitch and the lads and the ladies on the pitch are actually doing.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great even if the stat was able to tell you how much time the ball spent in people's hands, how much time it spent on people's hurleys, how much on the ground, how much in the air? What was the highest point the ball went to today? Was it like 100 foot in the air? Whatever. Yeah, how powerful was Grode Hegarty's shot against Kilkenny in the All-Ireland final last year? Wouldn't all that kind of stuff be class? No, I'm with you on that. More so for points might help out with Hawkeye. Obviously, in 2014, the slitter was completely wrong, as you would agree. a bit of a delayed reaction.
You never miss a chance, in fairness to you. You never miss a chance.
No. Can we have a guarded there with a speed gun beside the goal eating a Kit Kat? Would be immense.
Remember that famous ad when like the car drives past and your man is just there like eating the Kit Kat? He's just like the wind blows past him and he never even saw the car coming or nothing. Yeah. And
there was a scene, I can't really describe the scene, but anyone who's seen the movie Super Troopers and the Garda with the speed gun, they'll know the reference. It's quite funny. The Waterford Senior Hurling Championship draw was made last night. Group A, Ballygunner, Abbeyside and Passage. Group B is Mount Sion, 4 Mile Water and Tallow. In C, it's Rowanmore, Lismore and Clonea, and you'll have De La Salle, Dungarvan and Dunhill in Group D. So De La Salle up against Owen Cadigan's Dungarvan there. Lee Chin has been named the Wexford captain. He's retaining the position, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he went from being joint captain with Matt O'Hanlon to being captain by himself last year under Darragh Egan, didn't he? And I just suppose there was an announcement made there. Any county board are looking for any positive PR that they can get, and by putting that out, they're probably going to. Well, listen, they got us talking about it, didn't they?
Yeah, they sure did. Stephen Bennett, he's received a 1-match ban for a straight red card against Dublin last week. Davy says we'll take that medicine, we'll move on from it. He's also hoping to have Tig de Burka back by the end of the month. And he says we're hoping maybe the Antrim game, and if not the Tipp game, and we'll have him back in the panel. I could really do with having Tig back there. He's a fantastic guy, and I mean that genuinely. He's a really good guy to have around the place, really genuine, very smart. He trains as hard as anybody we have. He pushes himself to the limit. So, first game we're going to talk about this weekend, Clare against Limerick. Probably the rivalry in terms of entertaining matches in the GA at the moment. And would that extend to goal codes?
Yeah, no, I think so, yeah. The 3 games last year were 3 epics. It was down at the last Munster game and it was watched the other 2 games, obviously. There was nothing between them in normal time in those 3 games. And Limerick, or Clare, I should say Clare, literally went toe-to-toe with them. They were three of the better games, I'd say, last year. And this is a real bitter rivalry in the sense that it spills over into management teams as well. If you look at the Limerick management team, Alan Cunningham is involved there. His son Aaron had been playing with Clare when he was involved with Limerick against them. If you look at it from a Clare point of view, James Moore, brother of Niall and Ollie, is involved as a coach under Brian Lohan. It's Adrian O'Brien, isn't it? Shane O'Brien's dad. He's obviously, he's got Limerick links there as well. The ability for that to spill over because they're so close, I think that adds even more kind of intrigue to it. I don't know. I could be expecting about 20,000 nearly at this game. Genuinely, I think there's a massive thirst for it there. I was chatting Niall during the week, and he said he was expecting a humdinger. Said he was expecting a fair bit of spice in it too. And I'd be surprised if there wasn't, because Brian Lohan's teams generally do bring that, particularly against Limerick. And I'd say it'll be wired for it. And I think it's the second round of the league. We can't read too much into it, but I think I'll be expecting a cracker of a game.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how many changes both teams are going to make, because Limerick were much changed last week, and obviously they made switches as the game went on, taking off the likes of Grode Hegarty and Declan Hannon and so on. Last week, Brian Lohan, he gave Adam Hogan, Jack Kerwin and Brandon O'Connell their first league matches at cornerback, midfield and wingback. David Conroy, he came back for the first time in 4 years to play a game, and Grode O'Grady and Keith Smith, they made their league debuts from the bench. So maybe they both teams will play more frontliners, more regular starters, I suppose, in this game. But we might have the atmosphere, we might have 20,000 there, but we might end up having a huge amount of shadow boxing at the same time.
Yeah, from a Clare point of view, I don't know how much they'd be shadow boxing, to be honest with you. I don't know if that's their style, and I think particularly if Clare are off it physically by a couple of percent, they could struggle. They're look at the brilliant games they played last year. It was real on the edge stuff. Real kind of, that's the way Brian Lohan's teams generally play. It's quite on the edge. He played on the edge as a player himself. We mightn't have, all the personnel that we're going to see when they clash in Munster, but I still think it'd be interesting. Would you have Tony Kelly back in their 26 to bring in and potentially, try and tip them over the line? Expect Declan Hannon to play a bit longer, if providing that finger injury is okay. Same with Grode Hegarty, be expecting to play a bit longer. Expecting Cian Lynch to play a bit longer too. There might be an element. Of shadow boxing to it in terms of personnel, but I don't think there'll be too much shadow boxing on the pitch.
Yeah, in general, once you're on a hurling pitch and playing a match, that's where the shadow boxing ends.
Goes out the way. It really does. No matter what, you played in games the more than I have as well, where you might be thinking, oh, this is only first round of a league or second round of a league. It's all bets are off once you cross the line, and once a lad is kind of snarling at you and you're snarling at him, and it's a lad that you know pretty well that you probably went to college with, and you're just the competitor comes out in everyone. You don't want to be beaten by anybody on any day.
It's mad how thick you get on the field, isn't it? And the snarling and the dumping and all that kind of stuff. And you think about it afterwards, you're like, geez, you kind of lost it there for a little while. Aidan McCarthy looks like he's hit the ground running. A work accident meant he missed last year's league and championship, but he scored 10 points last week in a fairly easy win over Westmeath, 5 of those from play. Mark Rogers, is this going to be Mark Rogers' year? Scored 2-2 last week. We've been impressed by him anytime we've seen him the last couple of years. Wonder who'll pick him up from a Limerick point of view. Will Sean Finn be in there? That would be a lovely test for Rogers to see Kenny Hackett against Sean Finn if he's playing, or maybe could be Richie English, someone like that as well. Either way, players like that will really want to lay down a marker in this game and show that they're ready to be starting come championship time. Is there anything? Do you think Cian Lynch would be risked at this time of the year in terms of starting? Got 20 minutes last week. They'll probably be looking to manage his load, but I wonder, is there any temptation to say, right, let's start him here and see how he'll go?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I still didn't think he was moving at 100% when I saw him last Saturday.
But that could be rustiness, that it could be a case that, he's able to fully go, but he needs a bit of, he just needs a bit of road time now at this stage.
Yeah, potentially so. I tell you something, you have to admire him. If I was coming back from an injury or anything like that, I would definitely be staying under the radar. And he comes on the other night wearing white boots. You have to love it. He's just, and sure, Hegarty was wearing, I think Cummins said you could see his boots from the moon, they were that fucking bright. It was mad. It's just, they are definitely kind of their own men, shall we say. I would expect Cian Lynch to play the guts of a half on Saturday evening, and I think on home soil as well. I know Cork came down and gave them a bit of a scutcheon in the Gaelic Crowns last year. Whatever about Cork coming and doing that, they definitely won't be wanting Clare to come and do that anyway. And I'd expect, like, if Hannon is fit, he'd play the guts of an hour. Hegarty probably step up to about an hour, I'd say, as well. And it's an unbelievable, Shane. It's like different lads and different pieces move in and out, but it's like the Morrisseys never move.
I was just going to say the same thing. Has Dan Morrissey ever missed a game ever?
No, they're unreal. Like Dan and Tom, and I was only Niall Moore was saying this. They're a hand clubmate. He just said, if you saw Tom Morrissey playing at club level, whatever respect you have for him would just go even further through the roof. He just said he's impossible to handle at club level, and if anything, he raises himself another gear when he has the hand jersey on. But those boys start every game, from what I can see, and they seem to start and finish nearly every game as well.
Do you expect David McCarthy to start in goals again for Limerick? Like, if it's a case that, like, Nicky Quaid's the undisputed number one, but if it's a case that he somehow gets injured or whatever, they are going to want McCarthy to have had a bit of game time. And this game, if there's 20,000 there or whatever, and there'll be a bit of an atmosphere, it's probably a good time to try him out, isn't it?
Yeah, there was a high ball come in the first half the last day that he dropped, which you probably need to do. It's not the most glamorous catch, but that kind of the belly catch. You know,
gut trap.
Yeah, because when you're out here, you're quite weak. In here, maybe it doesn't look as good, and when you catch the ball, you've a lot more to do, shall we say, and you have to kind of lean in your body like that. But I'm sure he got away with it the other day, so he learned from that experience. I'd be like you. They kind of knew what they had with Barry Hennessy because he was there so long and so well drilled behind Quaid. Didn't play that many games, played the odd game, but they knew what they had if they need him. Whereas maybe now not as much, even though I know David McCarthy was on that under-21 team that Dermot Burns captained, where the vast majority of lads that are on the current generation have come through. But I think having a few games under his belt, having big games and pressurized games is huge. So wouldn't be a bit surprised if they had him in again this weekend.
Yeah, and one final thing that I'm wondering is, assuming Aaron Gallan isn't playing again, you know, he doesn't seem to be there at the moment, who's going to play at the tip of the diamond? Who's going to be the closest to goal? It was Seamus Flanagan the last day. Now, he's done his very best work, probably being slightly outside Gallan or working very close to goal with Gallan. So who's paired up there closest to goal with him? That seems to be something that they're probably going to have to try and figure out in the next little while. And that's not an easy solution because there aren't too many that are nigh on unmarkable in there at times.
Yeah, it's a funny one. Again, I was looking back at the game and I just, like, Gallan is just the ultimate outball, isn't he? Like, if they're under pressure, put it in anyway. Like, how many? He's definitely gotten a couple of goals against G in Championship in particular, Shane, where it's just been, you know, a big long ball in, not the most glamorous ball, and he times it so well. He doesn't engage in the contact for the high ball until the last second. You think he's not there, then all of a sudden he's there, and it's like he does it. It's like the Dan the Man move. He does it in one movement. He catches turns and scores all in one movement. They don't have, you know, a player like that, and I don't think Flanagan is that type of player. And they didn't maybe put the ball into those Gallan type positions the last day against Cork as much as they normally would. So, you know, if they are without him for a period of time, it's going to be interesting to see how they, like, what do they do? Do they not hit the ball in as much? Do they score from out the pitch? Do they try and run it more? That'll be fascinating because we've talked about, I think we had him, he end up number 2 on our power rankings. He's really a player that they can't do without. So it's going to be fascinating to see potentially over the next couple of games how they play in his absence. It seems to be absent at the moment anyway.
Yeah, imagine maybe Kyle Hayes did try it, but again, different type of player. There's not many Gallans out there. Don't mean to be dismissive, says Sean O'Sullivan, in probably dismissive tone, but Waterford have leashed this week, so no harm losing Bennett and having some rotation. That's obviously to do with Stephen's red card. TV Street, I'd like to see Davy saying, we'll take that medicine if it was the first round of the championship. Not worth the paper to appeal, like Sean says, 'tis only Laois. Harsh enough there from TV Street. Richard Hogan, game in Cork really only caught fire in the second half. This is against Limerick. Could be the same Saturday night by being a bit open in the first half, but probably get a better second half when the game's in the melting pot. Main thing about Laois is trying to not get anyone injured or carded again. Some of these lads are from Camross. Again, fairly sneery tone there from Sean. TV Street, do either Limerick or Clare really want to progress much further in the league, though? Kiely will start taking fellas off again to test the young fellas. So, yeah.
Well, they don't. Let's call it a spade, and this is, this is not good for competition. How many teams want to play in the league final?
Because it's too close to championship, maybe. Maybe if they had an extra week of a break or something like that, but sure, look, there aren't weeks to go around. So
Cork naturally have an extra week because they're not out the first weekend, so maybe it suits them. But like, you do have a situation, maybe coming into round 5 where teams that don't want to win a game, they don't want to end up in that position, because we kind of said it before, and it's the same with preseason competitions. Like, when you have official fixtures, you have to play them, you have to fulfill them, and you have to fulfill them to a good level. When you're not in that situation, you don't have to worry about it. And I think there'll be a couple of teams, Limerick in particular, that will just not want to be in a league final.
Yeah, this is to do with who would potentially step up if Aaron Gillan wasn't there. They tried Shane O'Brien in there. Obviously, he came off the bench last day, some tank of a man. That he is, but very young to be asking a lad to go in there. And obviously not road tested at senior level just yet. Not to say that he won't get there in time. Richard Hogan, maybe if there wasn't any semi-finals, that might help. Maybe if they just finished it off with, like, whoever tops the league table gets the win, and then is also guaranteed that preliminary All-Ireland quarter-final spot instead of the Joe McDonagh losing finalist. So Limerick are against Waterford this weekend. And Laois are against Waterford this weekend. Laois took a 20-point defeat last weekend against Tipperary, while Waterford drew with Dublin. And we're going to play a little bit of a tune here that sort of, I suppose, sums up what you saw in that game last weekend.
Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire.
So, what's that all about?
Well, the man behind the wire, I was only looking back at it. In recent days. And remember, there was always, like, great talk and rumour that Davy had a fella behind the goals, giving instructions to Mark Fanning when he was at Wexford about puckouts and stuff like that. I think he was actually caught on camera a couple of times, and of course, it was the night after and all that. It never happened or anything like that. But it looked to be the exact same the other day down in Flower Field, particularly on the bank at the far end. There was nobody on that bank, so there's plenty of people on the other bank, and there was still a fella in Waterford garb with a headset, throwing the ball back to Sean O'Brien and talking every now and then. On the other bank, where there was nobody, it was so blatantly obvious. The man was just standing at the back of the goals, and you could see he was like, it looked like he was giving instructions to Sean O'Brien. I don't know. I have to, like, listen, it's all going to be completely denied, and it's good. But number one, whoever it is shouldn't be there, number one, and they won't really be allowed to be there for big games. I just think it's bizarre that you need anybody there, or you need to relay any instructions to a goalkeeper, that the goalkeeper isn't independent enough to play it as he sees it and do what he feels best at a given moment in time. I just think the whole thing is bizarre. I think it's a paralysis by analysis, and I think you're nearly playing with a lad's head. No, he knows there's somebody there giving him instructions behind the goal. This is me. This is what I'm reading into the situation from what I'm seeing. And if that's the case, I think it's bizarre. I think it's mad. And I think it shows a lack of trust in your players as well.
Okay, well, look, obviously we can't say for sure, is that to control the goalkeeper in terms of the puckouts? Because you could have a lad behind the goals, speaking with the sideline, telling them what they're seeing in terms of a tactical setup.
You could, Shane, but the only one thing I'll say to you about that is you would have him standing up the top of the bank to make sure he's able to see everything, whereas this fella is standing down the bottom of the bank, and literally Sean O'Brien is the one person that's in his eye line.
Yeah, okay, well, just for the sake of it, I'm giving both sides of potentially what could be going on here. But I would say to you that in terms of getting an advantage with puckouts and stuff like that, if you had somebody high up in the stand, and I'd say around midfield, who's able to see the full picture of the pitch, like, yourself, if you're standing on the pitch, sometimes there's just lines of bodies everywhere. It can be difficult to see where the space is. Whereas, let's say you were up in the stand, Hogan stand, the centre of the pitch where we'd often be in the press box. You can look down, you can see where a big pocket of 20 yards is, and you can see the other side, a guy could make a run or is about to make a run across. If you were able to quickly shout, like, let's say, like, what position of the pitch number 12 is, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's left wing forward, everyone would know. So if you just
forward.
Left half forward. Let's say you shouted into your headset 12, and it went straight to the goalkeeper, and he's 12. He's like immediately knows how hard he has to hit it and where he has to go with it. So I think there is a big advantage to be got there. And a goalkeeper at times, like some goalies are very good at spotting it. Others aren't so good, but they're very good at putting it there if they knew where to put it. So I think there is an advantage to be had, if I'm being honest about it.
Maybe there's an advantage to it. Do you think it? Like, I just think a goalkeeper's head would be scrambled by all this potentially. Maybe you'd get used to it. I don't think you're going to be able to do it on the biggest days in the biggest venues.
Well, if you did have the goalkeeper with a headset in, so in American football, like big games, screaming crowd, all that kind of stuff, you do have the headset in the quarterback's ear. So if you had something similar for hurling, and I'm not saying you have the exact same type of equipment, and of course the helmet comes down over the ears in American football to keep it in place. That wouldn't be the case in hurling. But I'm saying theoretically, if you did have that headset, no matter how loud it is, if it's good equipment, you probably could communicate with the goalkeeper from the sideline.
That was the rumor in Wexford that Fanning had an earpiece. Now I don't really for 1 second really believe that. I think that, imagine like as a hurling goalkeeper, if you had someone talking to you during a game, or you're after making a mistake and you're getting bollocked out with in your earpiece.
You're after costing us the game.
I just think if you're looking for edges in this regard, listen, one part of me thinks it's a bit fascinating, another part of me thinks it's just a lack of faith and trust in your players, that you don't trust them to do what they see in front of them on a given day.
Yeah, but we'd like to keep things as amateur as possible, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but as pure as possible. You know, you want as little influence from the sideline, as little, I don't know, technology involved. You just want to keep it pure in the olden days. But so that Laois are obviously, it's a huge test for Laois after what happened last week. And Dan Shanahan operating against his native county, that adds a little twist to it here. And I suppose I'm looking at the Laois team from last week, and there's plenty of good players in there, but the manner of the defeat, I wonder, will Ross King start this game? Paddy Purcell, a couple more, maybe James Duggan get the start here. But they took an awful pace. And so what will Willie Maher be looking for from his team this week? Because confidence is sure to be down.
Yeah, they were kind of steamroll chain from the off against Tipp. No point in saying any different. All those names you mentioned, James Duggan, Patrick Purcell and Ross King, I'd imagine will all start. Peter Scully picked up what looked like a hamstring injury and was just standing in at the edge of the square at the end. So I don't know whether he's going to be fit to play, and they can't really afford to be really missing anybody. They'll just need to be more competitive than they were, and they were overawed physically. I would have said the other day, Willie Maher said, that they were 10 weeks into a project and that things weren't going to turn around, and that's fine. But people are quite unforgiving as well. Like there's only a certain, and he said that as well. He said there's only a certain amount of learning days that people will accept. They want to see competitiveness. They want to see a team, even taking the opposition down the stretch and making it interesting at least. So they're on the back foot, you'd have to say, from last week. I don't think Waterford will do the same type of job that Tipp did, but you would be expecting Waterford to win by, double figures-ish, I'd say, in the heat of the hunt.
Yeah, Waterford won by 33 points last year. So, there is kind of scope for something like that to happen. 731.
Oh, yeah, that was the day of the 7 goals, yeah.
Yeah, so, if you're to go through the performance from last week, you were there, obviously, in Thurles. What areas worked for Laois, or who actually did play quite well?
They couldn't get any ball. They got very little ball inside. Very, very little ball inside. Nearly all their scores were from out the pitch. I don't know if that was, they were, withdrawn enough, but they still had a man inside nearly the whole time. I was pleasantly surprised by their ability to score from range. James Keys got 2, Tomas got 4, nearly all from distance as well. But they weren't able to get their best players on the ball. Willie Dunphy was completely nullified at centre forward. He actually came off with an injury last day as well, so he's unlikely to start. They couldn't get Picky Maher on the ball. I think he might have got the ball in his hand maybe once in the course of the game. So, developing some sort of a plan where you're going to get your best players on the ball and they're going to be heavily involved no matter who they're playing against. If that's a case of having to have them out around the middle third and you score from distance, then so be it. Because if the quality of ball going into them when they were inside was just not good enough, and they were coming up against lads who were going up against Breen or Barrett in a 50-50 ball going into the forward line, there's really only going to be one winner there.
Yeah, Tomas Keys from Camross and James Keys from Cole Shanahan, both of those seem to perform quite well.
Yeah, they were very good. They got 6 from play between them. Tomas in particular hit 4 from play. And he was decent in the county final earlier on this year, or last year that I was at as well, where Camross were beaten by Clock Balacalla. But it looks like they're going to be down, as I said, Willie Dunphy and probably PJ Scuddy as well. So a big thing with Laois the last couple of years has been trying to keep their best players on the pitch. Like, they've had 4 to 5 big injuries throughout the league and carried that into championship and kind of been struggling to get their best players starting. And the problem is when you're coming up against a better caliber of opposition, you're pushing your body harder, everything's going faster, and you're more likely to pick up a knock as well. Realistically, for Laois, I'd say in this league, it's going to come down to that Antrim clash and who wins that game. And the winner, more than likely will avoid that relegation playoff, which is more than likely going to be against Westmeath.
Last year, Westmeath had a brilliant result against Wexford. That was a draw that day, wasn't it? 2-15 to 21 points. This year, and that's Joe Fortune, a Wexford native, managing Westmeath. I'd imagine that Wexford, especially after losing last week, they'll be fired up for this one to just kind of say, look, lads, the way it went last year, we can't allow a repeat of that. So number one, they'll be up for it after losing to Galway as well. Number two, because it's Westmeath. And then, of course, Westmeath, after being beaten by 25 points last week in Ennis by Clare, a bit like Laois, the heads are going to be a small bit low during the week. And it'll be a fair job for Joe Fortune just to get the players, ready and focused for this match and have that bit of belief. Now, luckily, it's a home game. That is the one plus point here.
Yeah, and all their really good results, going back to that under-21 win over Kilkenny as well, they've nearly all happened in Cusack Park and Mullingar. Big difference between when they played Wexford in Championship last year and, playing them in the league this year. Were they after running Dublin really close the week before?
They were level after about an hour and Dublin pulled away. I think maybe 1 by 6 or something like that.
Yeah, that's so like it's different when when the writing is on the wall. You can see you have you have that bit of previous. You have good form coming into a game, whereas they were obliterated last weekend by all accounts by a team that I don't think are going to get out of Munster. Just had to throw that in there again. The boys will be going mad. Someone there was a tweet put out the other night about the softest trophy that was ever won, or the something along those lines, and somebody commented Clare 2013, and I just tagged in Derek and Adrian McGrath because I knew that Derek had a meme of Triple H being held back. But they wouldn't have liked that anyway. But from a Westmeath point of view, what did they hit last weekend? 14 points. Like 14 points just won't do it. You're going to need, if you're only relying on 14 scores, you need something like a 3-11 to be in any way competitive. You need to be hitting minimum, 20 points, 121, 122, that type of thing. Wexford, I don't know if they'll still be without Lee Chin, who's obviously been named as captain again. Rory O'Connor is on the comeback trail, but probably won't be available for this weekend. So
vice captain.
Yeah, vice captain as well.
Along with Damien Reck, isn't it?
Damien Reck, yeah. And Damien seems to have slotted in at number 6. He played different places last year. He played cornerback, wing back. He played 6 at stages, but it looks like they're going with him at centre back this year. But Wexford will be fairly well forewarned going into this weekend, and I'd imagine they should have a decent bit to spare.
Yeah, Shane Powers says, morning lads, hope you're well. Finally getting to a live show for the first time in ages, but have still been watching the show when it's been uploaded. It's been uploaded every time, Shane. Let's hope today she can get their first win. Adrian McGrath, Clare man, will have your head, Verney. Clare from Munster, says A. Sully 180. So we want to talk then about the Galway against Cork thing. So last year there was, I suppose, a game that everyone thought Cork were going to win. Galway had been probably poor form, and Galway ended up getting a victory. Also went on to an All-Ireland semi-final and performed well against Limerick and probably saved what had looked like it was going to be a pretty average season at that point. And you made the point there this morning that an awful lot of Henry Shefflin's career, it feels like it's kind of revolved around big days around Cork.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like his first All-Ireland was against Cork in 1999. They were obviously beaten. I think was he held scoreless the same day? I think he was very quiet the same day. I have a memory of him and DJ both been held scoreless or something similar to that first day. So that's 1999. They obviously played in 2003. They were beaten by Cork in 2004. Then Kilkenny stopped Cork doing the 3 in a row in 2006. Then there was that Stepford Wives comment that Donald Cusack made, and there was you could see that there were tensions between them. Didn't Donald O'Grady make a comment in the build-up to one of the All-Ireland finals that where were Kilkenny? Was it in the War of Independence that he said, I think?
Yeah, I mean, if you look up at maps in terms of like reprisals around the time of the War of Independence, you know, places like Tipperary and Cork and places like that, they're lit up like the 4th of July. And then you have a place like Kilkenny where there's absolutely no reprisals at all. So you're just wondering, where were they? And what did they do to the gunpowder?
Like I think it was before 2004. I think Donald O'Grady brought that up. And yeah, that would cause a fair bit of a stir, I'd say. And then
I wind up Kilkenny lads constantly about this and sending them maps of the lack of reprisals to Kilkenny. It's great fun.
And then so you had that, and then Kilkenny beat them in 2006, and then Cork went on strike, which, to be like, you'd have to say, which is like the antithesis of a Kilkenny mentality, if you get me. Like, I'd never see them doing anything like that. It doesn't seem to be in their nature. And so it was two like big forces in the game, but with completely different set of values and beliefs, shall we say. So Cork went on strike in 2009.
That's unfair. Do you know why it's unfair? Because things were going smoothly in Kilkenny. Why would you need to strike there? And like, it's grand to say that like this is in the nature of the Cork lads to go on strike, but they went on strike because they had to, and because that's the rebel mentality. You don't stand for poor standards. Whereas Kilkenny already were getting everything. They had the right standards in place. Didn't have to strike. So I think you're out of line.
Some people would say that Cork
You're out of order, sir.
Some people would say that Cork have never recovered from the strike, particularly a lot of ex-players who would have played against them. And it's had a very divisive reaction amongst the county. But obviously they do have the Cork were quite outspoken, whereas Kilkenny generally then would have been. They would have been softly spoken. They would have felt that Cork were looking for the headlines, and Kilkenny lads would have been that. This is just the fact of it. They would have been staying away from them as much as possible.
This is your take on it. It's not the facts of it. It's your take on it.
So when the opportunity came in 2009, I think Cork were only back training like a couple of weeks. Is that the year they played a dummy team in the league? I think it is. And Kilkenny filleted them in Nolan Park. Was it 4-24-11? Remember, they got a stand ovation going in at half time, similar to the stand ovation they got going in 2 weeks previous when they absolutely filleted the Airboys.
And who was standing no taller than you? You were probably in there. Jeez, I'm so frustrated with you. You were probably the one there clapping away.
Wasn't there? I think I was playing league myself at that time. But Shefflin scored one of the best points I've seen scored in a long time. We'll just see it here, actually. So this is that 2009 game against Cork. He picks up the ball around his 45.
The music is so dramatic, isn't
it?
Yeah.
This
we didn't put that music in.
That little flick back off the left. And it's just like it was a great score, but like I remember Richie Power scoring a goal that day, and you could see Donald Cusack baiting the ground. Like they knew. I think he said it in his book as well about how, you know, Kilkenny sensed the opportunity and they went for the absolute throat that day and went to try and like. And I don't know if it was ever spoken or not, but they went to drive them back years, and that was part of it in delivering that performance. So then you have that 2009 strike. Then you have in 10, Henry did his cruciate against Cork in that semi-final, tried to come back after, that didn't work out. That was one of the main reasons, I suppose, that the 5 in a row went down. Then you have 13, he got sent off against, that is only sending off for Kilkenny?
Oh, I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah, and that was rescinded after. So that was 13. Even on the Sunday game, a few nights, he had a tetchy enough relationship between him and Don Logue over different things. And then last year, like Galway were on the floor after the Leinster final. And you would say Cork probably had the chance to really stick the boot in, didn't take it. And instead of Cork limping out of the championship, they left the championship, you know, a couple of weeks later with great credit against Limerick. So Henry's first year would have been a disaster if they'd lost to Cork last year, you'd have to say. Would have been a disaster. Whereas now there's a different viewpoint going into this year. But it's just amazing, like the checkered kind of history he has with the Rebels.
Yeah, in terms of like the reprisals and so on, and not having reprisals, TV Straight probably used it as an opportunity to squeeze in an extra training instead of reprisals.
I think they were in Carton House that weekend actually doing a training block.
Yeah, we're in Kilkenny. Great show, says Ray O'Dwyer. The Sox in the league final. Adrian McGrath's on 2013. You are mistaken, Verney. Cork lads raging over the extra 30 seconds before the greatest point ever scored at Croke Park is like a beautiful pepper sauce with a delicious steak, Verney.
Okay, I'm not sure. On 2013, I'm mistaken. Cork lads raging over the extra 30. Oh yeah, that was Brian Gavin had been harsh enough. Clare people would have said on Clare that day. That was the day we're the smaller fish. You never get the breaks when you're the smaller fish. That was the day that came out. Yeah, back to Cork and Henry. Like, I don't know if he'd be reading too much into this weekend. I'm looking forward to the game and going down and covering it actually. But his history with the Rebels has been kind of a fascinating one, really.
Yeah, and while 2013 has been mentioned in great points, the point that almost won the All-Ireland, that Patrick Horgan one, wasn't it a sideline cut? He controlled it on the run, turned and flicked over. Now, that would have been the greatest winning point. Well, sorry, one of the greatest winning points. Hard to think what would have been a better winning point, but that would have been special. In terms of strikes again, TV strikes.
Jamesy against Tipp. Sorry, like Jamesy's win. That was a brilliant winning point.
Will you ever leave it so? TV Street. Limerick had a big upheaval like Cork, but Limerick's slate was wiped clean, and the shithousery from the county board was not allowed to continue. A Sully 180. Limerick had a strike in 2010. Didn't do them any harm.
Different story now. I would say a different story. Like,
but standards, they're willing to strike for their standards, Verney.
No, it's nothing to do with standards. I just think
the
strike didn't sort out the problems with the Cork County Board. It was still like Donlong was still taking pops at Frank Murphy like up to 3 or 4 years ago. You could still see there was a tension there. I've never heard, and you've been chatting to Limerick lads as well, they've chatted about the strike and how regrettable it was and how people said they'd never go back to matches in Limerick. But I don't think there was that same divisiveness there. I don't think it split a county, shall we say. Whereas I still think there's probably, some logic to say that Cork are still not potentially over the strike and that there's still divisions there within the Rebel County.
And they had two or three impasses. It wasn't just the case that it happened once. And also, I think it's important that when it happened under in 2010 or late 2009, early 2010 with Limerick, it was with an outside manager. So I think it's easier for people to sort of blame the outside manager. Whether that's fair or unfair, Justin McCarthy, that it's easier to sort of like put it in the past when it's not people that are still going to be part of the furniture there moving forward. Yeah. Maybe that plays an impact
too. It's
the
funny, Shane, as well, that 2009 All-Ireland semi-final where he scored 6 goals, was it on Limerick? John Kiely left Croke Park that day, and I think he rang someone from the county board the next day wanting to say to get involved in any capacity, because that was basically the moment that he realised, I need to try and play my part or whatever. So Tipp have had a part in one of the greatest teams of all time, coming along with one of the greatest managers of all time.
Yeah, note for the future: when you're hammering teams, only beat them by 10 points and leave it at that. Take the finger off or the boot off the throat at that point. How do you think Cork will go this weekend against Galway? Like, Galway were very good in that second half last weekend. Not amazing. I thought Wexford weren't particularly brilliant, and this whole shooting from 100 yards thing that they seem to be persistent with forevermore is killing them. But how do you expect this game will go? Because big blow losing Robbie O'Flynn, but a nice boost to beat Limerick.
Yeah, I've kind of gone beyond trying to predict what Cork are going to do. The second half, you could really buy into what they produced against Limerick the other day. It's just a matter of I'm going to have to see them do it again and again and again. And like the league game last year against Limerick wasn't worth a hill of beans when they played them in the championship. Like, will this? I don't know. I'm going to have to see whether they can back it up. I wonder, will they go with Owen Downey at 3 again? Or will, it's funny to see him fighting out for a spot with his brother and the two boys in goals fighting it out for the same spot as well. A bit of a bizarre one. Looking back at the first half of the last day, like Cork hit some shocking wides, really kind of dire stuff at different stages, really bad wides. Conor Lahan had a good handful of them, came good maybe at the end when he was needed. But the fact that they were able to dig deep into the reserves and pull out a performance and really engage with Limerick was heartening, I'd say. But it's going to need to see them again.
Yeah, I think assuming they get the start again, Henry Shefflin's going to need to see a little bit more from the likes of Jarlath Mannion, Evan Nyland, if they're going to make a real push to start this year. On the flip side for Cork, Robbie O'Flynn's obviously not going to be available for this game. I think Brian Roach definitely did enough in that game, played at wing forward. His work rate was brilliant, that he'll definitely get a chance again this weekend. I'm wondering, will Shane Kingston get the start? Will Shane Barrett maybe get an opportunity from the start? Even Brian Hayes, big man that he is, trying to figure out will he work or not in the championship. You might as well start trying him out now in the league. Conor Cahalan, I could see him starting. I think Bosang, Lahan, maybe Dalton, I know he got the goal, but I think they all might their position will be up for grabs potentially this week, so they may or may not start. Or maybe Pat Ryan will give all of these lads a couple of more goals before he decides to mix things up. We'll kind of wait and see on that one. Give us your comments in there and let us know who you think will get a shot this weekend. But Grode McInerney did very well at fullback the last day. But I would say that Conor MacDonald is the sort of guy that he probably matches up pretty well with, because he's physical. MacDonald isn't lightning pace. He's an excellent hurler and he's a great hand. But if anyone's going to stop you in the air, it should be Grode McInerney under a ball that's kind of high and hanging. Really.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, you talk about like different strokes for different folks. I would agree with you. MacDonald,
I don't think Horgan will suit him, for example.
No. And can I just say something about Horgan as well, looking back at the game? Maybe I'm mad, but I couldn't remember when I saw it, I couldn't remember the last time it had happened, when Horgan took on a ball and ran at Aaron Costello. He didn't look to put the ball over the shoulder or anything like that. He wasn't looking for a point. He was putting the head down. I know I'm just going on my eye. I think he looks sharp. I think he looks lean as well. He looks very, very hungry. But I can't remember the last time I'd seen that, where I'm going to engage in a tackle here. I'm going to try and go through my man. I think he was dragged down and won a free. But yeah, he definitely looks hungry for road. It's funny you say about Dalton and Lahan. Probably because they won, they might all start again. If they'd lost, they might not all start again. But Pat Ryan has got a fair few lads, I think, still involved even in Fitzgibbon at the moment. So it's a bit of a juggling act at the moment.
Yeah, it certainly is. Just a reminder, speaking of Cork, we've got a coaching clinic coming up in Kilworth, County Cork. It's in North Cork, heading towards Tipperary, Waterford, Limerick borders. If you want to go to that, Colm Spillane, Eddie Brennan and Owen Brislan, they're all going to be there. You can get a link to where you can get the tickets in the video description. We've also got one in Tyrone this Friday. Keane Mackey, Conor Gormley and Conor Gilligan. What a lineup there. Both of them are free to under 14s. That's in Derryloughlin, County Tyrone. So get involved there. Also, ourstore.ie is the official home of the OurGame merchandise. That McCarthy lad in goals for Limerick has a way to go to get to the first team, arguing with the umpire and getting distracted by the ref, getting nowhere near simple saves. It wouldn't be Nicky Quaid. Harsh enough. He looks like, that was a first kind of appearance, so we'll give him a little bit more time than just that. Derek Lyng, he was talking about comparisons with Brian Cody, or he was certainly asked them about them. He didn't bring it up.
He definitely wasn't bringing it up anyway.
No, he says, being the first man in after Cody, and this is obviously like David Moyes coming in after Alex Ferguson. I suppose people are still trying to replace Sean Boylan and Meath, that sort of type of thing, coming in after the great man. And he goes, no, that didn't even enter my mind at all. That doesn't bother me. Like, I don't wake up every day comparing myself to anybody else. I'm privileged to get the job, but I'm determined to just get working on it and put my own stamp on it. The expectations are always there with Kilkenny, and that's to be as successful as you can possibly be, winning All Irelands. That's no different for me. That's fine. I've no issue with that. It's something that we're working towards every week, and for me, at the minute, it's about taking it on a week by week basis and looking forward to the games that are coming ahead. We've a big one this weekend. That's going to be against Tipperary. But he doesn't shy away from the fact that the expectation is All Ireland's, and that's what he's pursuing, which I like to hear.
Yeah, I don't think anything else would be acceptable to be said. We're in a 3-year program here. Come back to me in 2025 and we'll try and win All Ireland. Do you know what I mean? I just don't think. I think you kind of, it's like Pat Ryan in Cork. I think you have to put that out there. You have to show that ambition. You don't have to talk about it every time you do an interview or say that every time, right, like that. But you probably put it on the record. Interesting. My Irish Independent colleague Donica Boyle was down there, and it was funny. You've been down in the what would you call it? The area at the end in Nolan Park where they do a lot of the media briefings. It's like the clubhouse. Sorry, the clubhouse, and there's a big. It's funny, Derek Lyng was sitting there doing his interview, just like you're sitting there, and there's this big 10 foot, like nearly like a mural of Brian Cody just like looming over him. Like he's always there. He's probably always going to be there. I think it'll be interesting, like whether like Cody will be at the matches. Like he's an avid hurling man, but like, or will he stay away for a while and not?
Does he watch the show?
That's a fair question now. But it'd be interesting to see.
Comment in if you do, Brian.
Yeah. Bob open no, but I'd say. But it'd be interesting to see whether he go to the games or like would he want to be a distraction, because he would be a bit of a distraction. Do you know what I mean? But it'd be interesting to see whether he's going to be at it, especially like this weekend to be the first one really. Like would he be in Nolan Park at a Kilkenny
Would he be
game?
a distraction though? Like if Derek Lyng turns out to be a bad manager, and there's no suggestion that he will be, then I think it would be a distraction in the crowd. Like, do you know the way they constantly show Alex Ferguson in the crowd, on matches on TV? Yeah. But they even do that now when Eric Ten Hag is doing pretty well. Obviously the last couple of games haven't gone well, but it's a problem when the team isn't going well. But otherwise, it's like, look at him coming in here, delighted watching how well Lyng is doing.
Do you remember, that picture of Cody, the smiling one? He's like, really? No, but remember the time, was it not Ireland semi-final where some fella was driving with a load of big hay bales on the motorway and it hit and all those bales all over the motorway and there was carnage. That was Limerick and Waterford, all Ireland semi-final in 2021.
It held me up. I was coming up from Cork that day.
And it was just like, who is the culprit or who is the farmer driving? It's just that picture of Cody kind of smiling and smirking. But I'd say he probably will be at the games, to be honest with you, because just he knows nothing else, and I'm sure he'd take as much of an interest in the new Kilkenny regime as anybody else would. Yeah,
and like last week, Kilkenny weren't, they didn't blow Antrim away or anything like it. It was 1-18 to 15 points, so 6 points in it for a finish. Billy Drennan scored 1-8, 1-1 of that from play. I think they went ahead early on, had a nice little lead early on, but for the rest of the game, I think it was pretty much nip and tuck for the most part. So Antrim will be pleased enough with that. But Kilkenny, they had a nice few sort of names that we're very familiar with playing. So Mikey Butler was cornerback, Hugh Lawler was fullback, Killian Buckley and Pádraig Walsh and David Blanchfield were the half backline. Paddy Deegan and John Donnelly were named midfield. Wally Walsh, Keane Kennedy, Mark Mossy-Keown is in there, Billy Ryan. So it's not like it was an inexperienced team with like 8 new lads that we've never heard of before. Now the Ballyhale lads will obviously come back in dribs and drabs here, but what do you expect this weekend against Tipperary? It's a pretty new look Tipperary in terms of like there's 4 or 5 names either starting that weren't starting before or starting in completely different positions. Like put it this way, I think compared to last year, we were saying on Tuesday's show that only 3 players remained from Tipperary's team that played Laois in the opener last year, and 2 of those were in different positions. So it's probably more of a new look Tipperary team than it is Kilkenny team.
Yeah, there's a couple of new Kilkenny faces, the likes of Billy Drennan and Paul Cody, who I think played last night in the Fitzgibbon Cup as well. But generally, I think as a manager, Derek Lyng is coming in. He wants to give a few lads their head, but he also wants to win games. So it's a bit of a balancing act between maybe one lad in each line, shall we say, if you get me, and having 2 experienced lads with them, but you want to win games. I think this is the first big test for Tipperary or Kilkenny this weekend, and neither are going to want to lose. Like Tip are just not going to want to lose Kilkenny, and vice versa. Just think from Tip's point of view, I was kind of thinking about it a bit more after. Like, could you have a better person to take you off the floor than Liam Cahill? No, genuine, I mean this genuinely. When he came in, I just kind of comparing Pádraig Fanning's year with Waterford in 2019. He gave a lot of lads their head, new fellas, Prunty, Caleb Lyons, whatever, all these lads didn't go too well. But when Cahill came in 2020, then all these lads had a year of inter-county championship hurling under their belt, and he was able to get a bounce off them straight away. Last year, it was kind of the same with Bonner. A lot of new lads in, maybe hadn't started the championship before. I'm thinking even of like Craig Morgan, who's obviously not involved at the moment, but there's plenty of other names there as well. Connor Stakelin be another one. Cahill's coming in now. Tipp were, really bad Munster campaign last year. He's already got a bounce off them, like he's already got out of Waterford in the early stages of 2020. And his print is clearly on things. So he's clearly a very good manager at, performing this resurrection almost and changing fortunes quite quickly and changing a mood in a county quite quickly too, I'd say. Yeah, well, like it's not just one bad year for Tipperary. We're talking about 3 bad years for Tipperary in a row at this stage. And,
you know that I felt that there's no reason that Tipperary shouldn't be competing. And I'm not saying that they beat Limerick, nothing like it at the moment, but there's no reason any other team should be particularly dismissing Tipperary in the last couple of years. But, here's where we are. Yesterday, I was talking with Shane Brophy on Tipcast a little bit about Tipperary playing the modern game. So I'll play a clip from that. And I was wearing the same jumper yesterday. Playing the modern game, running the ball through the lines, going in threes like you had mentioned earlier. We saw hints of that last year when Tipperary played the first few games against Laois in those monsoon conditions, and then against Kilkenny in what was a fairly horrible game to watch down in Thurles. Remember, we were all fairly. It was a septic show for both teams, really. There's no sense that this is going to stop mid-flow like it did with Tipp last year. This is the way Liam Cahill and Michael Beavens play. So there's going to be just more and more of this. And to be fair, across the board, like, for example, watching the Wexford-Galway game over the weekend, that's all they're at as well. So this is the modern game. And it's not always going to be that exciting, actually.
No, it's not. I was actually sitting beside your OurGame Colin Michael Verney for the match on Saturday. And I'm not a fan of modern hurling. I lament maybe I'd love for the day to see a big full back coming out of the ball and leaving the ball around 100 yards down the field, and the roar of the crowds. Like there's while we got great maybe excitement in the last 10 or 15 minutes of the Cork Limerick game on Saturday night, maybe when guys are getting tired and maybe there's more mistakes coming, you get exciting hurling. But there's no doubt about it, while probably the level of skill and precision and scoring rates and everything in hurling has shot up, probably it's never been more skillful. I do think the level of excitement has been lost from the game, the modern game. I don't know if you would agree. Like, I don't think we don't get the same maybe one-on-one confrontations for the ball maybe that generated some great excitement over the years.
Yeah, so
I thought you were playing a clip of yourself talking for the first 30 seconds there.
No. Well, do you remember last year when Tipperary played played Kilkenny down in Semple Stadium? It was both teams were trying to move it through the lines, and it was
awful.
Horrific
very
game
bad,
to watch.
very bad.
118 to 117 to Tipperary, something like that. You couldn't see either team doing much that season. Obviously, Tipperary went on and did nothing. Kilkenny got to an All-Ireland final, to be fair. But I'd expect a much higher quality match this time around. And I'd expect a fairly good atmosphere in Nolan Park.
Yeah, I have to say, Shane, you talk about whether you can see a manager or a coach's prints, how quickly can you see them? Be straight with Cork, haven't really seen it with Pat Ryan yet. And he said maybe there's reasons for that and they haven't worked on too much yet. With Cahill and Bevins, it's like to see it like that, straight away. That's why, chatting John Milan a few times, he was at some Waterford training sessions that Bevins took, at the start of 2020, I think. And it's just everything is with, a man running beside you. Everything is to do with support play. Everything is to do with overlaps and whatever. And you can see it in Tipperary's style already. It's not going to be perfect. Far from it. It's not going to be perfect straight away. But you can see clearly that they already look like a different animal compared to last year. And from a Tipp point of view, you'd have to say that's hugely encouraging. That doesn't mean they're going to win All-Ireland this year, but it means it means that all you can ask for is that a county or a squad maxes out to their potential. If the potential of a squad is to get to a Leinster final, brilliant. If the potential of a squad is to survive in the Leinster Championship, brilliant. If it's to win an All-Ireland, better again. But just that whatever you have, the resources you have before you, that you max out and get the most out of them. And to me, Cahill's style, the question would still be whether the players are exactly there to play the style he wants to play, and whether that athleticism is there. There's still a small question mark about that, but there can be no question mark about the way they're playing and what they're trying to do. It's clearly defined, and it's very, very obvious what he wants them to do, and they definitely look to be trying to play to that system as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, and to be fair, he's doing it with so many players unavailable. I mean, Dylan Quirk, of course, passed away, sadly, but he would have been brilliant for this style of play, as would Craig Morgan with Cruciate, Barry Hefflin, Cruciate, and Jared Brown, who's now out for the season as well. He's lightning. And I know he was played more as an inside forward earlier in the year, but he is a big loss whether you played him out the field or closer inside. But Tipp, the one thing I'd ask you, are they, I was noticing about Kilkenny that physically they looked so primed during their Walsh Cup games earlier this year. They looked very beefed up. we would have said that Tipperary last year, there was a bit of an athleticism or S&C deficit compared to other teams. But to me, now, you were up close and personal. You would have seen it better than I did. Did they look that bit more conditioned this year? I would have thought so.
They did, yeah. No, they did, in fairness. And I don't know if that's to do with tighter jerseys or whatever. I don't know. But they definitely looked more honed than last year. You always trust your eye, what you can see. Do you know what I mean? You usually know. I follow the racing very closely, but I wouldn't be able to, tell you a horse is coming to peak fitness. Whereas I think with a hurler, you'd have a far greater idea. And it definitely looked like different kind of beasts, I would say, compared to last year. I thought that was obvious. Speaking of beasts, I was only thinking, looking at the Cork Limerick game, like, who'd win a muscles battle between Sean O'Donoghue and Sean Finn?
Can we organise it?
Sean O'Donoghue, I said, we talked about the pair of Sean O'Donoghues on him before. He came off injured the other day. I think he got a dead leg. He's literally bursting out through that jersey. He's an absolute tank. And we've seen Finn without the jersey on. Like, that'll go down as one of the most famous pictures ever in the history of the GA. I'd say.
Have you that picture hanging up on the wall? I'd say you do at this stage. You're admiring it so much. In terms of Cody, isn't Cody the village manager? I'd say he'd be there watching them boys. Richard Hogan, he might stay away on Sunday. First big game at Nolan Park. Cody's shadow could loom large over the occasion. Don't need distractions against Tipp. Brian Cody himself, it seems.
Well, fair play to whoever put that together. But I don't know if it's Rocky, obviously, and whose head is on it? It's not Rocky's head on it, though, is it? I don't think it
doesn't look like Cody's head either. It could potentially be his head. It's very hard to make out.
Henry Shefflin's, no?
Yeah, I'll be there, lads. Anyway, it says Brian Cody official. I'm expecting the Tipp Kilkenny game to turn into a different beast within the first 10 minutes. It's undoubtedly will with Limerick versus Clare, says TV Street. Cody won't even consider that, says Adrian McGrath, in terms of, I presume what you're saying is he'll be showing up and he couldn't give it, couldn't care less either way. I was at that game in Semple last year. Ray O'Dwyer says the style of hurling was shocking bad. Will Cahill's style be better? I would imagine so. Our Tipp on the way back, lads, or how far off are we? We're back, Led Zeppelin. Don't worry, we are back. Destroyed, now that's harsh. What was I referring to when I said destroyed?
Can't remember. It could have been something I said, to be honest with you. I can't remember.
It's a Donald Trump head. It's a Donald Trump head. Okay.
Very good. Okay.
It's going to be good. It's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. So that's going to be the Tipp Kilkenny this weekend. Looking forward to that match. I actually think it's going to be a bit of a humdinger.
It's a great weekend. It's a great weekend, the league hurling, Shane. There's at least 3 to 4, particularly Division 1 games that you're really looking forward to, regardless of whether it's shadow boxing or whatever. History would suggest that particularly Limerick Clare, Tipp Kilkenny and Galway Cork will all be intriguing games.
Yeah, Dublin and Antrim this weekend. I was at their Walsh Cup meeting a few weeks back, and Dublin, for the most part, were the better game. Now, Antrim didn't have the Dunloy men. They performed very well on their return last week against Kilkenny. But Dublin were always well ahead in that game, always looked to have that little bit more in hand during the match. And I suppose, to only draw when you're up against 13 men, 14 men for the last 15 minutes, and then 13 for the last 10 plus 7 minutes of injury time, and to be a point ahead when you're starting off, that's not great going. Fine, they didn't lose. That's great. They had a terrible start to the game, 1-5-0 behind. But to not see it out once you brought yourself back to a situation, being a point ahead and 2 men ahead, that's very, very disappointing for Donoghue, isn't it?
Yeah, yes and no, Shane. Yes and no. Because given the bodies they're without, maybe there's an experience deficit at the end of the game. Would they have seen out the game if the likes of Crummy, Rush, and maybe more experienced players were on the field? Maybe so, but there's a lot of new faces in there. I think Michael Donoghue would have taken their hand off for a point beforehand. Now, would he have taken their hand off for a point mid-game when they have 2 extra players on the pitch? Probably not. But I think going down there, they probably would be happy enough with what they came away with, and a couple of new faces kind of standing up. Maybe that the greater hurling public wouldn't have known too much about them maybe before the game. They'll be expected to win at the weekend. As you said, that was a high scoring game when they met in the Walsh Cup. Keely Malloy was back last weekend. Conal Cunning was back. They had several of the Dunloy's boys. It's amazing. Kilkenny can just afford to, bring the Ballyhale boys back willy-nilly or whatever. But in Dunloy or the same in Laois or Offaly or Westmeath, those players have to come back in straight away, or you're not going to be as competitive as you would like in Division 1, and that's just a matter of fact.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the Dublin team, right? And they are down those names. But like they have an experienced goalie in Sean Brennan. They have a full back line that's relatively seasoned here with John Bellew and Owen O'Donnell. And
I love the way any chance you get to bring up your clubmate Sean Brennan and have him as the number one. I wouldn't say he's that experienced at county level. That's not having a go at him. Alan Nolan was the keeper for a long time. But listen, you work your little narrative in there.
Okay, so John Bellew and Owen O'Donnell are very seasoned. Paddy Doyle, he's kind of hit the ground running in terms of being he's Naomh Barogue, one of a few Naomh Barogue lads involved. He's a centre back for DCU. I'd imagine for the freshers, he was playing as they absolutely battered TUD last night. They put a huge scoreline up there, so he's a very good player there. I know he got a black card the last day. Conor Burke is centre back with Dara Gray beside him. You know, that's not an inexperienced line. Then midfield, Fergal Whiteley, he's been there for years, obviously not always playing midfield. Chris O'Leary, the former Cork underage player, he's there. Now it is in the forward lines when that's where the issues occur. But isn't that always the case for Dublin? Like, look over the last few years, even towards the end of Matty Kenny's era, he's moving like Chris Crummy upfield because it's just not really happening in the forward line. And I know Keane Boland was excellent. He's had so many injuries the last few years. Donald Burke's very good. And then there's kind of little sparks from Keane O'Sullivan, Alex Considine, and so on. But that is the area where it feels like they're continually coming up short.
Yeah, you saw most of this game last Sunday, didn't you? I've only seen bits of it back. How did they react to having two extra men? Where did they play? Did they just sit two men back, or what way? Did they start like they should have probably just went for it nearly at that stage and left one man back sweeping, even push man up and force Waterford to defend. I don't know what way they went about it though.
Yeah, to be honest, it was all very, very frenetic at the end. And when you're watching on TV, it can be hard to tell where exactly our players on the field. So to be honest, I wouldn't be able to give you a brilliant answer on that one. But you expect more, and you expect, like, Ronan Hayes only came on at half time, so I'm not entirely sure is he carrying an injury at the moment or what's the situation. But he has to become that main man for Dublin, really. And then if you've got him and you've got Keane Boland and Donald Burke and maybe Whiteley will move back into the forward line and Keane O'Sullivan continue to kick on and maybe Alex Considine, then you will have that bit of a stronger attack line. But that is the big area for them. Between midfield and the forward line, that's where they seem to be just coming up short all the time. TV Street says Dublin seemed to get overexcited at the thought of the win being on. Panicked almost. I was quite impressed with several of their players. They're going to catch someone, So
yeah, they definitely have the potential to catch someone. Particularly, again, they have the potential to beat Wexford in the Championship last year. They've been very competitive with Dublin at stages, but it's a matter of
has to come in as well, by the way.
Yeah, what's his situation? Is he gonna be fit to play much league action? He hasn't been seen yet this year, has he?
No, and I've been at a few of their matches. I was at the Galway game in the Walsh Cup and the Antrim game, and obviously he wasn't playing last week. But I don't think he's too far away, but remains to be seen. But he'd obviously be a huge loss if he wasn't involved. Adrian McGrath says, Shane, did you discuss those lovely Clare jerseys winning the Hartley Cup on Tipcraft? On Tipcast, no, Cashel Community School had very Clare-esque type jerseys. But hey, it doesn't matter. They were the winning team, won the Hartley Cup, no big deal. Anything else you want to say about Dublin against Antrim?
No, I think Antrim would see it as an opportunity, though, wouldn't they? Particularly if they have everyone available to them, and the Dunley boys were back in last weekend. I think they'll see that as a chance. Like, I put it this way as well: if they're able to get a result, before they play Laois, they'd end up with an awful lot less pressure on their back. Even if it was a draw, they'd have less pressure going into that game. Even though at the moment, you'd have to say Antrim are a lot more seasoned at Division 1 level than Laois are. Antrim are capable of pulling off results and have pulled off results in recent years, whereas Laois haven't.
Yeah, okay, so in the Division 2A this weekend, Kerry against Carlow. I'm just wondering what the aspirations are for Kerry. Like, they will be in Munster if they win the Joe McDonagh Cup, or that's what they'll be headed for. Are they ready for that? Are they ready to get up to Division 1? I definitely think they want to get up to Division 1 as soon as possible. Like, you
want to be in Division 1 before you get into Munster.
Yeah, and even like in the Joe McDonagh now, they've been getting to finals. They lost one to Westmeath, they lost the other one to Antrim. I do think they want to make that step. I wonder, like, does Stephen Mumphy have absolutely everybody that he would want togging out for the county? Is there anyone he doesn't have at this point?
The name escapes me, but there's definitely one fella that was coaxed into the Kerry football panel. That's a very accomplished hurler. Can't think of his name offhand now. But I think he has the vast majority. That we were chatting to Pat Bennett before Christmas, and he was saying they basically have nearly everyone. But like going into Munster, like this is what are their 20s like? Their 20s haven't been really that competitive. Do you know what I mean? It's they're probably not ready, but you can't wait until you're ready either. Do you know what I mean? If you're there and you're good enough to win the McDonagh, they've been in the last 3 finals. If they're good enough to be in around those stages, what's to say they're not good enough to have a crack at Munster?
Yeah, and I think Carlow seem to have some issues at the moment. A lot of absentees. There's talk of a bit of hassle in the castle. I know the likes of Mouse Kavanagh isn't there. Obviously, they're probably most standout player. SSRI says Carlow have lost about 6 or 7 players from the team that bet Offaly last year. Woeful small pick there. You also do have Offaly against Derry this weekend, and Kildare, who had a very big victory last weekend against Carlow. They're up against Down. So Offaly Derry's a repeat of the 2021 Christie Ring final.
Yeah, and listen, you'd be expecting Offaly to get through here. It's been played in O'Connor Park. They got the result up and down last day. Probably wasn't, ultra impressive. Jason Sampson, who captained Shinrone last year, is the new Offaly captain. They generally have most of the lads in there that they should have. Kiely and Kiely's back in. Ben Keneally is back fit. They're going with Sampson at 6, and I'd say with Kieran Burke at 3 and Ben Keneally kind of floating anywhere around that back line. That's what it seems to be at the moment. Owen Catlin is back fit as well. I'd fancy Offaly to be winning that one. Kerry Carlow as well. Getting up to. They need to be in Division 1. They need to be in Division 1 Group B for a couple of years. Kerry do before they go into Munster, ideally, but listen, that's not an ideal situation. Johnny McGarvey's in charge of Derry. They had joint management last year, but Johnny McGarvey's involved in this year. And in the other Division 2A game, Kildare against Down. Down finished with 13, finished with 13, I think, the last day. No, finished with 14. Sorry, Offaly had an extra man for the whole of the second half. Kildare would fancy that, and they'd fancy their chances of kicking on there. Put up a big score last weekend.
10 different scorers in their win over Carlow.
Yeah. Again, there's another team that would love to be up in Division 1 over the coming years. Do we need to? I don't know. See, it's weird because depending on which counties are strong at different times, do you need to go back to an 8-team Division 1A and then a Division 1B where you're able to accommodate Kildare, Offaly, Laois, Antrim, and do it on the ranking system again? I'm not so sure. There are going to be a couple of teams over the coming years that need to be exposed to Division 1 and do not need to be going up and down from Division 1 to Division 2. It probably won't do them any good.
Yeah, and to be honest, I just want the league to take up less time in the calendar.
I know, I know that too, yeah.
Yeah, SSRI, none of the 2A teams this year would last the pace any better than Laois or Westmeath this year if they were in Division 1.
True, yeah, no, that is true, yeah.
Yeah, round 2, Division 2B, London are against Donegal. So Declan Coulter scored 8 points for Donegal in their win over Sligo last week. London lost to Tyrone with Kerry import Jack Goulding hitting 2 goals and Niall Broderick hitting another. So that's London-Donegal this weekend. Wicklow will meet Tyrone and Sligo against Meath. Meath are going to be without Damien Healy. He had a straight red card in the win over Wicklow. Sean Quigley got their first goal. Podja Hanrahan, he was in very good form with the place balls. And Trim's James Torr, he controlled the game from centre back. Sligo had 16 wides in their loss to Donegal, so they'll be looking to tighten that up a small bit.
Oh, they definitely will. Obviously, Eastkey getting to an All-Ireland final, you'd imagine, would breathe further life into a bit of a, you'd have to say, probably a bit of a resurrection that's happened in Sligo hurling in the last couple of years. Have gone from Division 3B all the way up to 2B. Winning a record along the way as well, getting to I think they were in the Ring Cup semi-final, definitely in 2021 anyway. The likes, they have plenty of good hurlers, as the Eastkey showed that night. They were probably outclassed a bit against Ballygiblin, but they still showed that they're able to fight it out at that higher level in Croke Park and come up against a big team and play well. So yeah, I think by all accounts the vast majority of that Eastkey team is the bulk of the Sligo team as well.
Yeah, Splash was listening to the second captain's episode that had Malky Clerkin and Jamie Wall, and it said over 40% of the intercounty hurling season is taken up by the league. Yeah, I had that conversation with Malky at Croke Park there a couple of weeks ago. So I wonder, is it on the back of me explaining that to Malky did he say that on the second captains. You might tell us when that episode was, Flash. Division 3A, Armagh will meet Monaghan. Fermanagh against Mayo, and Roscommon will meet Louth. So Armagh, who missed out on promotion when losing last year's final to Tyrone, they gave an early indication that they'll be in contention by beating Louth by 8 points last week. They're at home to Monaghan, as I said, who they beat by 21 points last year. Roscommon beat the Wee County by 13 points last year. Mayo, they were relegated last year. They take on Fermanagh, who were promoted from 3B. And then 3B on Sunday, as I haven't said these fixtures yet. Yeah, you've Cavan, Warwickshire and Leitrim against Lancashire. So if you want to go through those fixtures.
Yeah, Cavan and Leitrim were first round winners against Longford and Warwickshire last weekend, and both are at home in round 2. They'll be confident of enhancing their promotion hopes. I didn't fancy Cavan last weekend, I'd have to say. And in the Fitzgibbon Cup quarterfinals there on tonight, you have the University of Galway, the old NUIG, against SETU Carlow, the old Carlow IT, UCC against ATU Galway, which is the old GMIT, and UL against UCD. There was a cracking game last night in the Fitzgibbon Cup. SETU Waterford had a 3-16 to 2-16 win over DCU. So DCU's wait for a first Fitzgibbon goes on. They were without both Adrian Mullen, and I see Kieran Connolly was listed at number 34, 35 as well. So, sorry now. Yeah, I saw Connolly listed, but he played with UL last year, so that could be wrong. But just some highlights there from those games.
He's got Halley in front of him.
There's one of the scorers.
In a bit of space here if Cody spots him. It is Halley. Flicks it over Gibbons. Surely he'll finish it and win the game. Halley, goes to ground. He'll get another bite, and eventually gets it in, and that's it.
It would have been some nightmare if you hadn't finished that. You'd be living that one down.
Yeah. No, a few people are saying it was on that episode yesterday that they were talking about the league taking up 40% of it. The point I've been making for years, and I said it, and I'm actually delighted Malachy said it on another show as well, because it's a great idea to get that point across that we need to shorten the league, not talk about restructuring it to make it longer or anything.
And we're going to get dwarfed, Shane, by football fixtures this year as well. There's only a certain amount of hurling weekends this year, whereas football is bang, 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 bang. Like, it's the whole time, especially with this new structure. So I think we need to be a bit smarter about how we go about the hurling.
Yeah. Where were we there on our document, our preparation document? I got a little bit lost by finding that video there.
Yeah, no, just a big win for SETU Carlow over DCU. Finished 3-16 to 2-16, and we saw the highlights there. It was a cracking game. In the Sigerson semi-finals, it's going to be a UCC versus UL final. UCC had a 1-12 to 13 points win over TU Dublin. I believe Cathal O'Mahony, who's been busy with Ballygiblin and will probably be in, I presume he's in around the Cork football panel as well. He was the main man. He kicked 5, 2 frees. And UL, despite being without David Clifford, they had a 3-12 to 12 points win over DCU. I think there's 5 Clare footballers starting in that UL squad, and like that, you just couldn't have dreamed of that 5 or 6 years ago. And it just shows how strong the conveyor belt is there, and that Colin Collins it's not just about the senior squad. It's about everything that's coming through as well, and the conveyor belt that's coming through is really good from minor to 20 to senior in Clare.
Hey, the Super Bowl's on this weekend. Who do you think's going to win it?
Do you know something? I normally wouldn't even know who's playing, but the wrestler Seth Rollins, I saw something online. Are the Bears involved?
No.
Well, what's he on about then? He said he's a big Bears fan. I've no idea who's playing, Shane, being honest with you. Not a breeze.
It's Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, that means very little to me now, I have to say.
Jalen Hurts against Patrick Mahomes, the big one.
I have heard of Mahomes, all right.
Yeah, look, A Sully 180 says it's going to be the Chiefs. Sean O'Sullivan says the advantage. Yeah, okay.
The Denver Broncos.
Hey, you normally have an all quiz for us on a Thursday.
I actually have 2 questions really, really quickly, and I'm going to have to let you go because I'm in a hurry. 2 questions. First one is, the Laois footballers had their first victory in O'Moore Park in 3 years when they beat Wexford last weekend. So their first victory of any description in a league or championship game in O'Moore Park. Who was their previous win over? And it's a team in the football championship, and it's in the football league, I should say. So it was 3 years previous they had their last league win, and it's against a team that has gone in a different direction to Laois, I can tell you that. And the other question is this: Donald Down O'Sullivan, or Donald O'Sullivan Down as he's called, who kicked 1-3 for Kerry last weekend, he was the first player to make his senior football championship debut for the Kerry footballers. But what club does he represent?
Kilgarvan.
Very good. Excellent. Same as the Great Buff and the Healy Rays.
So my answer for the Laois one, so it would have been 2020 then, was their last league victory there at home in O'Moore Park. I'm going to guess they were in Division 2, probably a decent team. I'm going to guess Tyrone, because Tyrone used to be in Division 2 around then. So I'm going to guess a team that went on to win an All-Ireland since.
No,
Well,
it's Armagh. But like if you look at it, like Armagh are a seasoned Division 1 team now. Laois are down in Division 4. It's amazing how things can kind of go.
yeah, Adrian McGrath, 5 Clare starters plus 1 sub, and none of them fully established as first choice yet. The future is bright. Then go on to the Classical All-Ireland. I think we'll be in a situation, not entirely sure what the context at that point was, but Flash probably was making a good point. Right, that's it from the show. A reminder once again, you can leave there while I tee up the fact that thanks very much, Michael. We'll see you on Monday. Yeah, we've got some coaching clinics coming up this weekend. I've already kind of mentioned that we've one coming up in Tyrone. That's going to be a very locking GA grounds. Keane Mackey, Conor Dormy and Colin Gilligan are going to be there. And we're also going to have one in Kilworth this weekend down in Cork, close to the border of Tipperary, Waterford, and Limerick, Colin Spillane, Eddie Brennan and Owen Breslan. So that's going to be brilliant. So keep an eye out for that. You can buy tickets. If you go into the video description, there's a link where you can buy tickets.